So the process of prioritization of projects at the moment and how retailers are looking at this is really interesting. As I mentioned before, there is a recognition that we are moving into a new normal, but what that new normal exactly will look like is not clear to anyone. It's also not clear how long it will take us to get to the new normal in terms of having a set of stable customer journeys, consumer behavior that make up the retail experience. So when we look at projects in that timeline, what we're looking at is projects that are to deliver value in a tactical manner during the lockdown. And a lot of that work is being done already. And again, we'll talk about a couple of examples of that. But those projects are, again, very tactical in nature. As we move to that new normal, what we see is that there is a need for a phase to do experimentation. And that phase of experimentation where we are moving from our current situation to the new normal can really vary on time. What we're thinking is that it will be marked by initially having heavy restrictions where the access to the store is limited, where some stores will continue to be closed, to go into a scenario where all the stores will be open, but there will still be safety restrictions, very strict social distancing in terms of locations and just interaction of people. And then probably there's going to be a phase until we get to the new normal where there is going to be a suppressed demand, where essentially the individual restrictions are a higher consideration than government restrictions. At the moment, people are primarily driven by what the government is telling them not to do, but the concern really is once the different governments are providing more freedom of action is how much consumers will prefer to actually not go out to the shopping center or the mall or not spend as much as they were doing before due to crisis, due to safety concerns. And really that is what is going to then drive us to the new normal. So it is certainly not a very happy scenario, but certainly there is an opportunity there in terms of experimenting and figuring out what are the right customer journeys, what is the behavior that consumers should have as we move into that new normal. We have a window to work towards and try to adapt to these new conditions. So again, going back specifically to the projects, we are seeing that the projects can land in any of these phases, and the scope of them has to be tailored to those phases, whether are really specifically targeting the lockdown, whether they are projects that would allow for that experimentation to figure out what are the right customer journeys, or whether they are longer bets for addressing the new normal. And obviously there will be some that cross over. Then the other set of characteristics that we're looking at is in terms of initiatives that were there before the crisis and that are being reviewed now, is really very specific to each retailer as to how conditions have changed. And the first aspect of that is really about the product demand, and that's as we saw before, the demand of different items has been impacted severely. So how much that applies to each retailer depending on the market they're in. Secondly, the digital maturity. Depending on how mature the retailer is, it will have to address their ability to work from home, their ability to deliver projects in a distributed way, and that certainly will impact how risky it is for them to deliver large transformation programs until they have that base capability against digital. Channel distribution is also critically important. As we saw in the survey, most customers are accelerating their plans for increasing the participation of online. Capabilities for Omnichannel is really an absolute necessity to have Omnichannel in place, and so is the project building on existing capabilities, is helping on that area. New regulations, again, this is something that we are expecting to see, new regulations that are impacting stores, that are impacting point of sale potentially. Those have to be addressed against the backdrop of each project initiative. And finally, as well, as we talked about in terms of the findings from our customers, any potential issue on the supply chain that will impact inventory. So these are criteria to keep in mind when looking at the prioritization of projects, and specifically for each retailer, the answer will be quite different. What is really common across is that the opportunity cost of really choosing the right projects in 2020 is very, very high, because as we mentioned before, the capital expenditure is going to be quite limited, quite tight. So with this prioritization criteria in mind, both in terms of the dimensions to impact and the timeline, we see different projects kind of falling into four buckets. The projects that are digital transformation, and those, again, many of them linked to working from home. The bucket of projects that fall into omnichannel quick wins, and we call them quick wins because these are initiatives that maybe in the past they would have not been executed as quickly, thinking perhaps with concerns perhaps about customer experience, customer satisfaction, and in the context of lockdowns and the situations that we are in, that threshold of customer satisfaction experience maybe is a bit lower, and there is more of an appetite for risk of bringing some of this capability forward quicker. Then there is a bucket for generally addressing technical debt, and this is obviously interesting because depending on the situation of the retailer, some retailers have more space to more wiggle room to address these issues now than others, but it's certainly something that we are seeing as an opportunity area to look at projects that perhaps were put in the background, and now they can be executed in the context of stores that are closed. And finally, a bucket of initiatives that we call modern commerce, because they are really primarily looking at new ways of engaging with customers, new customer journeys, and very much a position for the new normal, for delivery, not an immediate delivery, but a delivery when these new behaviors have been stabilized. And across these initiatives, clearly very different whether the retailer is an essential retailer or a non-essential retailer. What each one of these initiatives means for them is clearly different. So the first bucket to talk about the digital transformation. So digital transformation, again, seen primarily as the ability of having distributed teams operating primarily from home, moving away from the concept of remote working, where essentially there is an idea that there is a central place to where people have to go back to, or where people are doing their primary job, and actually maturing that model to a distributed model where everyone is working primarily away, and there is not a central physical operation as such, but everyone is essentially working in the cloud. So that means really acceleration of existing initiatives for digital transformation that the retailers might have already had in their plans, and the introduction of new collaboration tools. Specifically for stores, the enablement of DevOps is critical, particularly the processes for release management that have to be executed again in a distributed manner. Typically, as well, teams have been reduced in size. The processes for testing equally, teams have reduced. In some cases, they are not there, but still there's a need for completing testing, particularly regression testing. So having a DevOps capability it was important before, and it becomes more critical now. And capabilities like virtual labs, the ability to create builds automatically, deploy them, automatic testing, and then really have a whole suite of analytics available to all stakeholders. That has become more critical than ever, and is an area of focus. Then digital support collaboration. Here, many organizations were probably already using things like Microsoft Teams or Slack. And what they are finding is that they have to kind of take that to a next level, where the support activities for stores are all available in digital boards, and the collaboration tools that they are using are linking to those support activities for everyone to have full visibility. The ability to manage and collaborate on the backlogs for projects is also critical, and a lot of work is also being done on that. And then really using those tools for production performance and incident management. There is a need for having all of this information available more than ever, without requiring of direct interactions with people. And And again, that's those activities for automating collaboration or facilitating the collaboration across distributed teams have become critical. And then the other, I think, main area that we're seeing is training. And training, there are a couple of opportunities in terms of the fact that the impact to day-to-day activities of different parts of the organization can be very different. And so this, for those that have more time available, having a better offer for internal training is important. And furthermore, there is an offering for training that can be executed completely remotely. So in that respect, we have also been working with customers to provide training solutions online and give the opportunity to build content independently in that users become both trainers and trainees in these schemes. When it comes to omnichannel quick wins, so again, these initiatives are initiatives that can be delivered in a short time, perhaps in some cases in shorter time than was anticipated before. What we see in terms of the different types of initiatives, we're seeing initiatives that are really about adjustments to order volume. And that can be just managing the volume at the front end for e-commerce, whether it's with online queues or scheduling applications for staggering deliveries. Limits to item quantity in point of sale. This is something that we had to deal with a couple of customers early on in the lockdown. Price markdowns and how to manage prices through this crisis is also something that we are seeing. Other quick wins have to do with last mile delivery. Curbside is something that it's become really prevalent in US. Third-party delivery integration services. There's a number of vendors that are providing services for last mile delivery, and that integration is something that we have been looking at as well. And then initiatives for order integration of e-commerce to stores, that's kind of been taken to the forefront. In many cases, the integrations between e-commerce and stores were already there for some omnichannel journeys, but they were not really thought through for volume fulfillment of orders. That scenario was not as common. And then really the opportunity to extend the number of channels, the number of e-commerce channels where there might be a possibility of selling through another e-commerce platform or selling through a marketplace. Those are things that we are seeing our customers doing, and we're helping them with. And finally, again, from a quick win in omnichannel, we've seen an uptake on phone orders taken by stores, which from a POS perspective is a fairly simple process to set up, where you need to allow for the manual key entry on PET of the credit card details. You need to set up a new tendering point of sale, and this has become, again, for customers that have the locations open, a good alternative for allowing customers to place their orders before they physically arrive to the store. Addressing technical debt. Again, this is a very large bucket, and something that, depending on the retailer, the buffer they have to do these activities is change a lot. But we're seeing in store operations performance tuning opportunities, the possibility of looking at cloud for scaling, and this lockdown gives an opportunity to re-engineer the infrastructure. And then projects around order tracking and recovery of orders, which very much associated with the increase on volumes of orders. Retailers that are on essential retail are prioritizing. Also, from a technical debt perspective, in store maintenance, we're seeing health checks, and this is something that we are working specifically with many of our retailers, many of our customers that have their stores closed, to establish the steps required to open up again and make sure that when they open up, there's no issue in that process, and that anything that can be done from a maintenance perspective, because before the store opens, is done. And that includes, again, activities like data ports and so on, and the ability to do remote operations for a store opening and closing is so, again, also something that we're seeing from a store maintenance perspective. And then the other area from a technical debt perspective we're seeing is store monitoring. Most retailers will have monitoring already in place, but this is an opportunity to look at extending the monitoring to business operations, to those processes that involve staff and customer, and that can be visualized in a digital way through dashboards. Extending the monitoring to all peripherals, which usually is something that retailers will have gaps on, and then better exception tracking. And this is, again, we're seeing different solutions. Obviously, some of our customers use our monitoring tool, which is Redmond, but we help them as well with other vendors that have dedicated solutions for application monitoring. And then finally, when it comes to modern commerce, some of the things we're seeing, new payment options, community delivery, BOPIS, where essentially there are options for people to contribute to orders and create the concept of a community order that has multiple people in the process of the delivery, in the process of the payment. And delay payments, which again is something that was more seen and more accepted in some markets, certainly in Latin America, in also Australia, New Zealand. In those markets, delay payments, finance for payment of big items is more common than perhaps in Western Europe and US. But the anticipation is that it's going to become much more common due to the crisis. Increased automation through AI, with a reduction in staff, better support through chatbots, both conversational and transactional. That's something that we are seeing, and an increase in observability for support, which is really the ability of anticipating issues before they happen on the stores. And then as new customer journeys that we're seeing, the ability to do video clienteling is an interest that has increased, and also the ability to broadcast from a store, where again the limitation of people not being able to go to the stores physically can be mitigated by digital engagement.